Hi, this is Pavan from KINDUZ Business Consulting. We are going through the course on Introduction to Lean Six Sigma. We will be covering the part 2 of 8. This topic covers the perspectives of Lean Six Sigma. For those of you who have not gone through our previous presentation, we have uploaded all these videos onto the KINDUZ Consulting Network, and the KINDUZ Consulting Network is available at kinduz.ning.com. That is kinduz.ning.com. So that's the website where we have the KINDUZ Consulting Network. I will just show it to you in a moment before we start the course. The KINDUZ Consulting Network is out here. As you would have seen, it's http://kinduz.kinduz.ning.com. On this network we have uploaded all the videos. There are videos on various aspects including strategic career management, retailing, career management as a whole. You will be able to network with a lot of senior experts in the industry and have discussions with various people on the forum. For example, people out here having discussions on Lean Six Sigma. So I invite you all to have a look at the KINDUZ Consulting Network and make use of it. Moving on with the presentation, we've talked briefly about the history of Lean Six Sigma in the part 1. As you would all know, Motorola started the Six Sigma initiative in their organization roughly around 1979. By 1986, we have articles where it's given that Motorola saved close to $16 billion cumulatively. That's a huge amount of money that they saved between 1979 and 1986. Jack Welch, the legendary CEO of General Electric, initiated the Six Sigma program in GE in 1995, and by 2000 GE started to save roughly $2 billion annually. That's a lot of money that they started saving using Six Sigma. One of the key things that Jack Welch did bring in and his team brought in along with Six Sigma was bringing that business perspective to all Lean Six Sigma projects or the initiatives that an organization kickstarts. So the whole idea is delivering the business value both for the company and also the customer satisfaction. That's for the end customers. Allied Signal is another firm that started saving roughly $1.2 billion a year using the Six Sigma methodology. So for a company that can save so much amount of money using the Six Sigma initiative, it's a huge benefit because you either grow your sales, your revenue, or you're improving your profit margins. And when you translate that to the stock value on the market, that's a huge jump. I mean, the valuation of the companies goes up drastically. So Six Sigma, Lean Six Sigma are tools that can help bring in stakeholder value, can help bring in the business value for industries that implement it. So let's take the other view of Lean Six Sigma is understanding mean vis-a-vis variation. I was reading a nice story about an Olympic coach who was asked to pick up 2 shooters so that their country can win the Olympics gold in shooting. So he shortlisted a couple of them and wanted to select one of them. So he picked up the person A and said, hey, go ahead and shoot. And then this guy started shooting, and he shot 6 arrows. And what you see out here is represents something that the person A shot. And then if you look at and then the coach did some statistical calculations and said, okay, From an average perspective, if this arrow is 2 times away from the center and this arrow is -2 times away from the center, as in this case it's about 1 plus 1, this is -1, everything averages out to 0. But what the coach did see is that there's a lot of variation in how the arrows were shot. And then then he said, okay, to the person B, go ahead and shoot your set of arrows. The person B started shooting his arrows, and then what happened was all his arrows were very close out here, and that was an interesting observation. When he calculated the average, it was somewhere between around 1.5 for all the arrows. But when he looked at the variation, there was not much of a variation out here. All the arrows are very close by, and now the coach had to make a decision between the two. And this is a question that I ask a lot of people in my training programs, and this is generally a split between the two. The coach actually selected the person B out here. The reason is all he needed to do was just move the hand of the shooter a bit down, and then he would hit all the arrows right in the center. So the whole idea behind this slide is to explain to you the difference between average and variation. And the reason it's very important is because, assuming you have your telephone bills or credit card bills that need to be delivered by the 10th of this month, so that you could make the payment by the 25th of every month. Now, if you do get your bills every month on the 10th or 11th or the 9th, you still find there's a predictability. So which is actually something that represents here, there's not much of variation. Or even if you could receive your bills somewhere between the 15th and 17th, although they are actually supposed to be delivered by the 10th, you still find, because your bills are always late by 1 week, so you don't have much of a confusion as to whether the bills have been lost or whether they've been posted or not. But if you take the first option, it represents a fact that the bills are being delivered once on the 5th, once on the 20th, once on the 15th, once on the 7th. So this is a huge amount of variation in the delivery of your bills. And for a customer who's getting such kind of bills at such dates, there is no predictability. Sometimes he has too much time to pay the bills, sometimes he has too less time to pay the bills. So that's what customers don't prefer. They prefer consistency, they prefer predictability, and that's what, as a manager, as a leader, it's very important to focus both on the average state of the outcome and also the variation of the outcome. These are two key aspects that need to be looked for when you're doing an initiative. From a quantitative perspective, 3.8 sigma would mean that if there's a business process that the manager says that is at 3.8 sigma capability level, it means that they're doing it 99% right. Now what that would mean is roughly about 7 hours per month of no electricity. So that 1% that is not right represents no electricity for 7 hours per month. If you look at the number of operations that are being done in a hospital per week, 3.8 sigma, or doing the operations 99% right, would mean roughly 5,000 incorrect operations per week. So that's a huge number. Now 99% right would also mean that there are roughly 2,000 wrong prescriptions per year. So sometimes doing things 99% right is not enough. You need to be doing something at a much higher rate. Let's take an example of airline takeoffs. You cannot be 99% right. If you are 99% right, you probably would have 10,000 crashes of flights in every million takeoffs. So you need to be at a much more higher level of capability for that particular business process. Now, what does a Six Sigma mean? A Six Sigma means that you would be doing a certain thing 99.99966% right. Now that is very tough to achieve, but in some scenarios you ought to achieve that. So what does Six Sigma mean in terms of a day-to-day operations perspective is that there's no electricity. It means there's no electricity for 1 hour every 34 years. Now in a place like India, now there could be some areas where that's true, but in most of the cases that isn't true. I mean, just think of having no electricity for just 1 hour in every 34 years. It's amazing. Now one of the projects that, or the initiatives that the state electricity boards can pick up is saying that, hey, you know what, I want my end customers to be at a Six Sigma level, which means no electricity for 1 hour every 34 years. What is important though is it practically achievable or not? Is it the best business decision to be made or not? Because if you want to achieve this, there's a lot of investment in terms of capital that needs to go in to achieve this, which might not be possible. I mean, it might make sense for the government to spend on the people, on their health, rather than only on electricity. So it might not be right for every business process to be at Six Sigma, as we discussed earlier. As an individual, as a leader, as a manager in an organization, you got to figure out what's best suited for your business process. Six Sigma also means 1.7 incorrect operations per week. It also means 68 wrong prescriptions per year. So that's the level of quality that you would be maintaining in case you are at Six Sigma. Now, what Six Sigma also showcases is that if you are a Six Sigma company, then your defects per million opportunities are just 3.4. For example, if your job is to deliver cars, what Six Sigma would mean is for every million cars that are manufactured and delivered to the customer, there are only 3.4 cars which have defects. And a 3 Sigma would mean roughly 66,810 defects in a million opportunities for committing those defects. So that's what is the difference between a 1 Sigma or a 3 Sigma or a 4 Sigma or a 6 Sigma. From a statistical perspective, this is how the Sigmas or Six Sigma would, what Six Sigma would mean. Now, assuming you are delivering credit card bills, your company manages credit cards, and you've done a survey with the customers, and the customers have said that your actual delivery date of the credit cards bills should be roughly about the 20th of every month. But if you deliver the bill 3 days before or 3 days after, that's okay. Anything that falls outside these limits, or between the 17th and 23rd, is a defect from a customer's perspective. Because if you probably deliver the credit card bill too soon, the customer might think that you might not have included all the transactions that are required, and he might just end up calling you again just to make sure everything is okay. Now, if you do deliver the bill after the 23rd, the customer will not have enough time to pay the bills. So these specification limits that are set by the customers. They are not set by you as a person. You cannot say that, if my flight takes off within 2 hours of my designated time, I'm fine. But what you need to look for is what your customers are asking for. If your customers say, look, if your flight takes off 5 minutes before the scheduled time and 5 minutes after the scheduled time, it's okay with me, but beyond that, it's not okay with me. Then those become your customer specification limits. If you want to be successful in your business, you have to figure out what those customer specification limits are, and then try and make sure that you meet those customer specification limits 99.99966% of the time, which is when you can say that this particular business process of mine, for example, the flight takeoffs on time, is a Six Sigma process because it meets your customer requirements 99.99966% of the time. Now, let's go back to this example and say, there's a company X that's delivering credit card bills. It's supposed to be delivered on the 20th. The customers have said, maybe from a survey, that any time between the 17th and the 23rd is fine with us. Right? Now, let's say in a place like Atlanta in Florida, the credit card company delivers 1 million receipts to the customers, and they've done some calculations and they've figured out that on an average they deliver it on the 20th. Great, but there are some delays that do happen. Now, if the standard deviation is 0.5, now Six Sigma would mean plus 6 into the standard deviation, which is 0.5. So 20 plus 6 into 0.5 is 23. So what this graph represents is that all the bills that have been delivered in Atlanta are within the required specification limits. Now this is basically, you could draw it through a histogram where the area of the curve represents, or the height of the curve represents, the number of deliveries at a specific time or a specific number. So for example, most of the deliveries have happened on the 20th. There are some which have happened probably on the 21st. There are even less which have happened on the 22nd, let's say. So that's what Lean Six Sigma is from a statistical perspective. So if your standard deviation is 0.5, and obviously we're not going to cover these formulas of standard deviation, but the idea is that if your customer specification limits are between 17 and 23, which have been set by the customers, and if you are able to deliver your service or your product within these limits, right, you're just fine. That particular business process is at Six Sigma. That's what this represents. From a quantitative perspective, Six Sigma also these are some examples from a quantitative perspective. For example, most of the hospitality fatality rates due to mistakes, most of the the capability of the process, like restaurant bills, doctor prescriptions, payroll processing, airline baggage handling, are all somewhere around 4 sigma, between 3 and 4 sigma. Now what that means is that per million transactions, per million activities, there are roughly 6,200 errors. So for million baggages that are handled in airports, there are 6,000 mistakes. For million doctor prescriptions that are written, there are roughly 6,000 errors. For million operations in hospitals, there are probably some kind of mistakes that are happening roughly at a rate of 6,000 mistakes per million operations that are done. Now, some of the business processes for Motorola in 1990 were between 5 and 6 Sigma. Before moving forward, I just want to let you know that most of the business processes fall between 3 to 4 Sigma. And if you have some of the critical business processes roughly about 3.8 Sigma, you're doing just fine. You're probably one of the best in the world at this point of time. Now, in terms of airline fatality rate, they are roughly about 0.52 airline fatalities or crashes per million takeoffs. So that's much higher or close to about 7 Sigma, which is the requirement. I mean, you cannot afford to have airline takeoffs and fatality rates at 3 Sigma. I mean, nobody would be flying in that case. You cannot even have it at 5 Sigma. These are very rare occurrences and they need to be rare. So that's where you'll find your airline fatality rates. Now, from a customer's perspective, what is 6 Sigma? This is the most important aspect of Lean Six Sigma, of the Lean Six Sigma methodology. And what you need to remember is any Lean Six Sigma initiative in an organization starts with the customers and ends with the customers. And this is very important. I'm going to repeat it and say, any Six Sigma initiative starts with the customers and ends with the customers. So what are the questions you need to ask? You need to ask and say, hey, what is my customer's view of the process? Right? Now, what does this mean? Well, it's simple. Let's say all of us have traveled in airlines, and we want to be treated well the moment we enter the airport till the time we leave the airport. Our view of the flight, taking the flight process, starts right from we enter the airport to when we get out of the airport after we land. But let's say there's an airline out there that says, hey, you know what, we are 99.9999966% on time. Well, customers will say great, but they'll also ask, what's your view of the process? And you'll hear sometimes people saying, hey, you know what, our view of the process is from the time the flight takes off to the time the flight lands. And well, yeah, most of the times the flights, if you look at it from that perspective, are going to be on time. They're going to take roughly only 1 hour to travel, 2 hours to travel, 2.5 hours to travel, not more than that. But most of the hassles that customers have is when they are on the ground. When the ticket which they get, which is supposed to be confirmed, is not confirmed. Whereas when the flight doesn't take off because of technical errors or because of weather issues, or when the customer lands on the airport, he or she doesn't find the luggage and realizes that it's not coming, it's going to take 2 to 3 days to come in. Now that's the customer's view of the process that needs to be kept in mind. So it's very important to understand what is my customer's view of the process, so that you're able to then focus on that end-to-end process view from a customer's perspective and improve it. Because that's not just your view of the process. The other key aspect to ask is, what do the customers expect out of the process? Which is, what are the outcomes that the customers are looking for? Is something that you need to understand. And the outcomes could be on time arrival of flights, it could be on time arrival of luggage, it could be neat restrooms or toilets when they go into the airports, it could be availability or help for handicapped people. So there are things that you can quantify and there are things that you cannot quantify. And things like customer satisfaction cannot be completely quantified. So you need to understand these requirements from the customer in terms of your quality, speed, cost, security, legal requirements, as well as the emotional aspects that the customers might be looking for, which is a very critical thing. The other key aspect is, which you need to ask for any business processes, how do my customers measure my process? Well, I can take some simple examples. I mean, for a customer, the inflation in the prices for commodities that they buy would include the commodities or products like petrol, gas, your food items, it could be your clothing, it could be some like luxury items as well. But there are some governments that only include food, and that too some small items on the food, and then they also include some items like clothing, but they don't include oil in the whole picture. And then you do see announcements coming in where they say, well, the inflation has dropped. Maybe that's true from their measurement perspective, but the way the consumers or the people in a country measure is they include everything. So maybe in the same time the oil has shot up from $2 to $4, but the government says the inflation has gone down. So it's very important to understand how your customers measure the process, and then change your measurement system to match that. Because even if you do an initiative to improve the customer satisfaction, if you're not measuring it the way your customers are measuring it, there's no way you're going to make a direct impact to the customers. You might be missing something. There's a classic example which I personally have faced, where we had gone on a consulting assignment with our customer, for our customers, and they wanted to, the CIO of the company wanted help with setting up metrics around effort variance, schedule variance. Basically wanted to know, are my projects being delivered in the right budget, in the right time? So yeah, we set up the measurement system, drew some beautiful control charts, took it to the CIO, and the moment he saw the control charts, he said, this is too complicated for me. I mean, I really can't understand all these control charts. So what he said was, just tell me what's in this month, what's the percentage of projects that have been delivered on time and that have not been delivered on time. And along with that, give me a list of people who handle these projects. And that's about it. That's what he wanted to be measured. It was pretty simple. And that's how our customers wanted to measure the process. So we gave it back to them, although it was based on the same data, but it was represented differently. So this is very important to understand. The next question, which we've already talked about, is what is my customer's definition of a defect? So if my customer says that if the restroom in the airport when I come in is not good, I'm not going to be happy. That's a defect. Now every other step in the process might happen right, like the flight takeoff, like the flight landing, like getting your baggage, everything. But the customer feels that I'm not happy with this flight because the restrooms were really bad, they were not clean. Well, you might say that, I'm only concerned about the flight takeoff to landing, but that's not what your customers want. You're going to still leave them unhappy. So you need to understand what is the customer's definition of a defect And this is another classic example where we were doing some IT testing work for some of our clients. The client came back to us one day and said, you know what, I think your productivity is not good. Your team's productivity is not good. So we said, okay, great. And we went back to our desks. And obviously we didn't have data at that time to prove or disprove anything. So we went back to our desks, we told our customer, look, we're going to start tracking it. It might take us about 1 to 2 months for you to get us data and to show you some trends. So he said, fine. So first month, couple of months, we looked at the trends, we benchmarked it against the industry results, and we took it back to our customer and said, look, you know what, we're seeing improvements in the productivity, and the productivity is much better than the benchmark data that we have from the industry. So the customer was very happy because this was the first time we were showing him some data on productivity, and he was very happy, and he said, you know what, this is perfect. I mean, I'm fine with the whole thing. And so sometimes you just need to change the perceptions that your customer might have, and they might not be actually defects, but they might be just perception issues which you need to handle. And in this example, it was just perception issues. And it's a different story that we got so close with that particular customer that he actually helped us sell another $20 million of business in the US. So I mean, and the only thing I can credit for us being very successful were these simple tools and techniques from Lean Six Sigma. It just changes the way you look at things. It just changes the way you look at the customers. It's not about quality improvement. It's about improving your customer satisfaction. It's about growing the business. That's what Lean Six Sigma is. It is definitely about improving quality, but the end result needs to be customer sat and business improvement. So, if you have understood all these 4 things, and then you launch an initiative for improvement, how do you measure results? It's simple. Check whether your customer satisfaction is increasing. Don't check it after 6 months. Check it in short frequencies, but not too short frequencies either. Talk to them. Find out if what you're doing makes sense. Find out from them if they're seeing an impact. Have them involved. Most of the customers do appreciate the fact that you're talking to them. And what's the best way you can gauge if your business is getting impacted in a positive way is if your customers are referring you again, or if they're buying from you again. If they give you repeat orders, that's when you know that the customers are very happy, and the effort that you're putting in to understand the customers, to understand what's their view of the process, what's their view of defects, how do they measure it, is all helping. That is Lean Six Sigma. It's all about the customers, it's all about the business. Quality is how you achieve that. Well, how do you achieve all this improvement? How do you become more customer centric? How do you achieve those business results after you identified that, hey, at a high level, this is what we need to do? Lean Six Sigma has multiple approaches. What you see out here is what is called as the DMAIC approach. It's called the DMAIC. There are other approaches like the DMA, DFSs that we're not going to cover in this presentation, but sometime in the future. And as we've covered in the first presentation, all Lean Six Sigma says is that you have to make the improvement or solve the problem in a structured way. And this is a guidance framework. Remember, it's just a guideline. You might not be required to do all the phases, but this helps you structure things. So what do you do in the define phase? That's the first phase. You define your business problem as objectively as you can. If you don't have numbers, that's fine as well. So you define your business goal that you want to achieve, you define your business problem that you want to solve. And then you move to the measure phase. In the measure phase, you measure your current state. If in the define phase you were just able to define the problem in a very subjective way, now you go back and say, hey, you know what? I want to deliver all my credit card receipts between the 17th and the 23rd. I want 99.9996% of the receipts to be delivered at this time. So in the measure phase, you're actually measuring the current state. You might have to go back to the define phase, redefine your business problem in a more quantitative way. And then once you do that, you come back to the measure phase, and where you set up a good measurement system, and then you move on to the analyze phase, where you're analyzing where does the problem lie, what are the constraints that are stopping me from achieving what I would want to achieve. That's the analyze phase. I mean, I'm explaining all these things at a high level. Obviously, we're going to go through things in more detail. Once you analyze where the bottlenecks are and how the improve phase is where you identify how can I improve these things. Obviously, you could do 100 things to improve or achieve a certain business goal. But you got a shortlist and say, hey, you know what, these are the 2 or 3 areas that can get me the most business benefit in the shortest span of time. That's what you do in the improve phase. You also pilot the solution. Instead of doing a global rollout, you make sure you do it in a small area, make sure it's successful, and then plan out for a full-fledged rollout. And then comes the control phase, where once you made certain improvements, you got to control things to make sure they are sustainable. Let's say there was a person X who was 100 pounds or 300 pounds, 100 kgs or 300 pounds. A person wants to lose weight. Well, he starts going to a gym, starts working out 4 days an hour, 4 hours a day. And let's say he loses weight drastically in a month's time. But then if he stops going to the gym and starts eating the way he or she used to eat before, they're not going to be able to control the weight gain. They're going to get it back. So you have to control a particular initiative to ensure that some of the successes that you have achieved are sustainable. That is what you define in the control phase. So you define things like, okay, if I have to control this process, if I want to ensure that the cars that I'm producing will not have the defects that used to occur earlier, I still need to put together a set of people who continue to keep checking. I'll need a set of technology. I'll need some budget allocated to make sure that the controls are working on a constant basis. That's what you do in the control phase. You ensure sustainability. You make sure that you build a culture in the organization to make sure that things sustain. That's Six Sigma from an operational perspective. So, what we've covered in the first 2 presentations about Lean Six Sigma is a high-level overview, different perspectives of Lean Six Sigma. We've also covered that Lean Six Sigma helps you achieve business results, helps you directly impact customer satisfaction, and how you achieve it is through the DMAIC methodology and through quality improvement of a specific business process. In the next presentation, you will go through the defined phase of Lean Six Sigma. Till then, have a good day. Wish you all the best.